Ever walk away from a conversation feeling completely drained, like someone siphoned off your energy? Without a second thought? What if your generosity is being mistaken for obligation, and it's slowly eroding your peace of mind today? I'm breaking down 5 toxic behaviors that absolutely no one should ever get away with. Some people truly believe they're entitled to your time, your energy, and your peace as if you're a human vending machine for emotional support. Got a bad day? Punch the button and expect you to dispense comfort. And when you dare to set boundaries, they scoff, dismissing them like flimsy suggestions instead of firm limits. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't even realize the extent of the emotional toll until they're running on fumes, stuck in survival mode, and questioning why they feel hollow after every single interaction. I once worked with a woman named June. Sweet, dependable, mid-60s. She was the type of neighbor who'd bake cookies just because. The kind of mother who never said no even when she should have. She always believed saying yes made her a good person. But it wasn't until her own daughter asked to borrow money for the 4th time in 1 month, with 0 repayment, that something clicked. June realized this wasn't love, it was manipulation cloaked in familial ties. It wasn't support, it was entitlement masked by a last name. And that realization is where this video begins. Because here's the deal, there are 5 specific behaviors you should never tolerate, not from your romantic partner, not from your boss, and certainly not from your own family. If you keep brushing them off, thinking it's not that bad or they don't mean it, the emotional cost lands squarely on you. So if you're ready to stop explaining away disrespect and finally protect your inner peace, do this now. Like this video, drop a comment below, and hit subscribe. Your emotional boundaries are about to get bulletproof, and it starts right here. 1. Constant criticism. There's a kind of emotional erosion that doesn't hit you like a wave. It creeps in like a slow leak. One day it's a casual remark about your clothes. Then it's your voice, your laugh, your ideas. Over time, you start to shrink, not because you've changed, but because someone has chipped away at your confidence piece by piece. This type of criticism isn't just annoying, it's emotional sabotage. And it's the first behavior on this list you must never accept, no matter who it comes from. People often confuse this with helpful feedback. But let's be clear, constructive feedback is thoughtful, specific, and rooted in a genuine desire to see you grow. What we're talking about here is not that. This is criticism as a power play. It doesn't address what you do, it attacks who you are. And for many, especially older adults who've internalized this, under the label of tough love or toxic family dynamics, this behavior becomes dangerously familiar. But just because something feels normal doesn't mean it's healthier psychologically. Repeated criticism from those we care about can rewire our brains. It activates our threat response systems, training us to expect rejection even when it's not there. That's not discipline, that's damage. Picking up from where we left off, constant criticism doesn't just bruise your self-esteem. Over time, it rewires how you see yourself. And it's in that rewiring that the real damage unfolds. You begin to question your own thoughts before they're even spoken. You second-guess every creative idea, every vulnerable share. That natural confidence you once had, it's not gone because you lacked it. It's been steadily stripped away by someone else's comments, remarks, and emotional strategies. And the tactics, they often hide in plain sight. In families, it's the offhand comparison. Why can't you be more like your brother? As if individuality is a flaw. At work, it's the supervisor who ignores every success, but zooms in on every minor mistake. In relationships, it's the partner who slips in subtle insults disguised as brutal honesty. I'm just telling the truth, they say. as if their version of truth is a weapon you're supposed to accept. With grace, these aren't harmless quirks. These are patterns, emotional strategies that make you smaller than you were meant to be. And here's the part that's easy to miss. The longer you stay in environments like this, the more your inner voice begins to mimic theirs. From a Stoic point of view, this isn't just harmful, it's a betrayal of the life you're meant to live. Stoicism values strength, yes, but also discernment. It doesn't mean staying silent in the face of pain. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught, you may not control what others do or say, but you are entirely responsible for what you accept, what you allow, and how you respond. Living with dignity means drawing strong, unwavering lines. A person who consistently puts you down is not helping you grow. They are slowly eroding your self-respect. And it's time to stop mistaking sabotage for support. So what can you do when you realize this pattern? Start by validating what you feel. That sinking feeling in your chest when you're around them. That tension in your shoulders. The fatigue you carry after the conversation. The pause before you pick up their call. Those aren't coincidences. They are not just little stress moments. They are the body's alarm system warning you. Something here is not right. Your discomfort isn't a weakness. It's intelligence. It's your nervous system, your intuition, your emotional compass pointing you toward something that needs to change. Then choose your response, and it must be yours, for some. Especially when this behavior comes from family or long-time relationships. The solution won't be dramatic confrontation. Sometimes, it starts with a gentle shift, redirecting the conversation, setting quiet limits, or communicating your needs more clearly. I don't find that comparison helpful. I need a little space today. I'd appreciate it if we could talk in a different tone. Those small sentences, they're powerful. They reclaim space for others, especially when the behavior is persistent or escalating. The solution may be more firm, creating strict boundaries, limiting time with that person, or even choosing to walk away entirely. And while that may sound harsh, here's the truth. Keeping yourself in toxic environments just because it's easier than telling the truth, that's how years disappear in silence. Let's be clear, you were not born thinking you were less than enough. That belief was given to you, taught, repeated, and reinforced. And like any bad lesson, it can be unlearned. Nobody has the right to attach conditions to your worth. No one gets to make you feel almost good enough under the mask of concern or love. The moment you identify these patterns is the moment everything starts to shift. You stop shrinking. You stop second-guessing. You start hearing your own voice again, not the one shaped by fear, but the one rooted in truth. And every small step you take back from that noise is a giant leap toward healing. That's when their control ends. That's when your clarity begins. Next, we're diving into another powerful boundary violation, one that might look harmless on the surface, but carries deep emotional consequences. It begins with a real story of an elderly client whose son slowly crossed a line she never thought needed guarding, until it did. Let's continue. Earlier, we talked about recognizing emotional erosion and how reclaiming your space begins with acknowledging the invisible patterns that steal your peace. Now, let's talk about when those patterns go beyond words, when someone doesn't just make you doubt yourself, but crosses the physical and emotional lines you've clearly set. I'll never forget a session with an elderly client, graceful, soft-spoken, fiercely independent. She had given her adult son the spare key to her home, not for everyday use, but for emergencies. It was an act of trust, grounded in love. At first, he used it just as she expected, dropping off groceries or mail when she wasn't home. But then, things started to shift. He began letting himself in unannounced. Once while she was napping, another time while she was in the bath. No call, no knock, just appearing, sitting in the living room, waiting. The next week, he did it again. That was when she asked me, her voice barely above a whisper, "Why do I feel guilty for wanting privacy in my own home?" And that question, that right there is what boundary violation looks like. It's the second behavior you should never overlook or excuse. When someone repeatedly ignores the boundaries you've clearly set, and then flips the script to make you feel like the problem, it's not miscommunication. It's manipulation. It's not about misunderstanding, it's about control. And the wound it leaves isn't just about the act itself. It's about what that act silently says. Your comfort doesn't matter. Your needs are optional. Your autonomy is up for debate. Boundaries aren't walls, they're guidelines. Invisible but powerful fences designed to protect the most vital parts of who we are, our time, our space, our energy, our emotional bandwidth. For some people, it might look like asking for notice before someone drops by. For others, it's setting limits around personal topics like steering clear of religion or politics at the dinner table. In relationships, it might mean carving out alone time, being transparent with money, or respecting digital privacy. These aren't unreasonable requests, they're basic needs, and yet, boundary violators, especially those closest to us, often make us feel like setting limits is a betrayal, that somehow asking for respect is an insult. Why? Because some people were never taught boundaries. They grew up in environments where closeness was conflated with control, where love was expressed through access, not respect. In those worlds, saying no feels like rejection, and asking for space sounds like abandonment. But there's another type of boundary crosser far more dangerous. The subtle kind. The ones who know what they're doing. They don't storm in with demands. They test the door, a gentle push here, a quiet nudge. They're watching what they can get away with. When you finally speak up, they flip the script. Call you too sensitive, cold, or selfish. They weaponize your empathy, turning your desire for peace into something you feel guilty for. And the most damaging part, these violations rarely explode. They creep like slow leaks. A co-worker who makes jokes about your private life, a parent who brings up your past failures in public, a friend who borrows money with no intention to return it, a partner who accidentally reads your messages individually. These might seem small, but together, they chip away at your self-respect until you start questioning whether you even deserve boundaries at all. From a Stoic perspective, boundaries are not just practical, they are moral. They're how we govern ourselves. Epictetus wrote that no one can rule your inner world unless you hand them the reins. But the Stoics also taught stewardship of the external, your time, your energy, your space. And when you let others continuously overstep, you don't just lose control, you lose clarity on what's yours to protect. The answer isn't aggression, it's not hostility, it's clarity. When someone crosses a line, speak. You don't have to shout, you don't have to fight, but you do have to be firm, respectfully, calmly, repeatedly, if needed. Because every time you ignore a violation, you train them and yourself that it's okay. And as we'll see in the next section, not every violation looks like a breach of privacy or a cruel comment. Sometimes it comes disguised as care under the name of obligation, guilt, or loyalty. Let's take a look at the third behavior you should never tolerate. Continuing from our last section on boundary violations, we now move into something even more subtle, more insidious. Because while physical and emotional boundaries can be seen and described, what happens when the damage is done inside your mind? Let's begin with a simple truth. Boundaries mean nothing without action behind them. You can speak your truth with clarity, stay calm, avoid drama, but if someone keeps ignoring your limits, It's no longer a communication issue. It's a choice, and it calls for consequences. When you assert a boundary, do it with precision, not emotion. You don't need long explanations. You don't need to plead your case or prove your worth. Just be clear, describe the behavior, explain how it affects you, and state what needs to change. That's it. No apologies, no guilt. Because you're not punishing them, you're preserving yourself. But here's the part most people overlook. Boundaries without consequences are just suggestions. If someone keeps crossing your lines despite calm, clear communication, you're not in a dialogue, you're in a cycle. And cycles don't break with words, they break with action. That action might be reducing contact. It might be walking away from certain conversations. In some cases, it may mean cutting ties altogether, because every time you allow repeated violations, you send a message, one that says your boundaries are flexible. And if something is flexible long enough, people start to believe it's invisible, real. Love doesn't fear limits, it respects them. The people who care for you may not get it right immediately, but they'll try. They'll ask questions, they'll listen. And most importantly, they'll adjust. But anyone who claims your boundaries are too much or too difficult, they're revealing exactly how little they value your autonomy. So here's the question: how many times have you sat in discomfort and said nothing? How many truths have you swallowed just to keep the peace? Maybe that silence was necessary before, but now it's costing you too much. Your energy is sacred. Your peace is not up for negotiation, and your boundaries, they are not optional. Let that be your line, the one no one crosses again. 3. Manipulation and gaslighting. No, we step into the third behavior, one of the most dangerous of all. Manipulation and gaslighting. Did you know long-term victims of gaslighting can lose the ability to tell the difference between intuition and anxiety? That's the kind of damage emotional manipulation leaves behind. There are no bruises, just confusion. It doesn't shout, it whispers, until your inner voice grows so quiet you stop trusting it altogether. Unlike overt abuse, manipulation doesn't announce itself. It sneaks in, quietly, carefully. At first, it may even look like kindness, concern, or love. That's what makes it so lethal. If criticism destroys your confidence, manipulation attacks your clarity. You don't just feel unsure of what to say, you begin to wonder if you're even allowed to feel at all. It starts with small phrases. You're overreacting. I never said that. You always twist things. These aren't simple disagreements. These phrases are strategically designed to make you question your own perception. They don't just deny your reality, they replace it. And slowly, piece by piece, you hand over your certainty in exchange for temporary peace, until you don't trust your own memory, your judgment, your gut. That's not a relationship, that's psychological dislocation. Pause and reflect. How do you feel after being around them? Do you leave conversations feeling unsettled, like you missed something, but can't put your finger on what? Do you replay arguments in your mind, trying to confirm you weren't imagining things? That's not just anxiety, that's your subconscious, trying to rebuild the truth after being emotionally dismantled. The Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius, taught us to prioritize truth, to learn to see things as they are, not how others package them. They reminded us that perception isn't always reality. But gaslighting works against this wisdom. It distorts reality so thoroughly, you begin to lean on someone else's version of the truth. And in the next segment, we'll break down exactly how to spot these manipulative patterns as they form, and what practical steps you can take to reclaim your voice before it's silenced. Let's move forward to the next truth you need to hear. Continuing from where we left off, gaslighting isn't just manipulation. It's a systematic dismantling of your inner clarity. And once your sense of truth is shaken, what comes next is even More dangerous, a complete disconnection from your own reality. When you're constantly second-guessing your memory, your feelings, your version of events because someone else has trained you to doubt them, you start to lose your grip on what is. It becomes harder to trust your instincts. And the longer you live like this, the more unstable your world feels. This is especially painful for older adults, those who've built entire lives on rationality, resilience, and composure. Suddenly, someone much younger or emotionally erratic begins to challenge everything they believe about themselves, not with arguments or logic but with subtle, scattered fragments that chip away at certainty. And that's the weapon: doubt. Not loud, not violent, just persistent, just sharp enough to convince you that maybe you're the problem, maybe you've changed, maybe you are becoming fragile, but you haven't. You're not weak, you're being manipulated. How do you defend yourself? First, stop trying to win the argument. That's a trap. A gaslighter doesn't want understanding. They don't want resolution. They want dominance. The more you try to explain, the more ammunition you hand them to twist and distort your words. Instead, step into observation mode. Begin writing things down. Keep a journal of conversations. Document the contradictions, not to attack them, but to reconnect with your own truth. Gather emotional evidence so that you remember what actually happened. Then, test your perceptions. Talk to someone outside the fog, someone who isn't part of the emotional chaos. Ask them what they see. When they confirm your experience, and they will, you'll start to see just how far you've drifted from your center. Finally, set a consequence, not a threat, a boundary with a door. And when the pattern repeats, and it will, step back. You don't need a dramatic confrontation. You don't need a breakdown. What you need is freedom. Because here's the terrifying truth about gaslighting: you often don't realize it's happening until you've already started silencing yourself. But there is a line. And once you find your way back across it, once you rediscover the sound of your own voice, you'll realize something powerful. You were never the problem. The problem was that you stopped trusting you. Gaslighting is not a miscommunication. It's not a mistake. It is a deliberate system of emotional control. And no one who truly loves you would ever want to blur, bend, or erase your sense of self. So, trust the discomfort. Follow it back to the pattern. And if someone repeatedly makes you feel like you've lost your mind, it's time to stop giving them access to it. That's not cold. That's not selfish. That's wisdom. And it's yours to reclaim. 4. Dishonesty that destroys trust. No, let's talk about the fourth behavior, something that doesn't manipulate your emotions in the moment, but corrodes the entire foundation of a relationship over time: dishonesty. There's a specific kind of silence that settles in when you realize someone has lied to you, not misunderstood, not misspoken, but lied, clearly, consciously, with intention. And in that moment, something breaks. Not just between you and them, but inside you. Because 5 minutes ago, the world still made sense, and now it doesn't. This is what chronic dishonesty does. It doesn't just betray your trust. It destabilizes your emotional reality. And it's the fourth behavior that no one, not a friend, not a parent, not a partner, should ever be allowed to get away with. Some lies arrive with charm. Others come cloaked in justification. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to protect you. But no matter how well they're dressed, the result is the same. Your emotional ground begins to crack. And it's not the giant, outrageous lies that cause the most damage. It's the slow, steady drip, the ones you can't quite catch but feel in your bones. The white lies, the half-truths, the promises made and forgotten. The stories that shift ever so slightly, just enough to make you wonder if you misunderstood. This kind of dishonesty isn't just inconvenient. It's destabilizing. It makes you doubt whether reality is something you can ever fully hold onto again. And in the next section, we'll uncover the hidden cost of that doubt and how even tiny fractures in trust, when left unchecked, can reshape the way you see relationships forever. Let's turn the page and keep going. Following from our last section on dishonesty, we saw how lies don't just fracture trust, they corrode your sense of reality, making you question not only others but also your own judgment. And the longer this goes unchecked, the more it costs you silently, deeply, relentlessly. When someone lies to you over and over, it does more than break your trust. It starts to unravel your relationship with yourself. You begin to question your intuition. You recheck conversations in your mind. You wonder if you're being too sensitive, too demanding, too naive. That's the real damage, not just that they lied, but that now you can't trust your own instincts. Dishonesty isn't always loud or obvious. It has many forms, some so quiet they almost go unnoticed until they've done lasting harm. There's omission, what they don't say, but no matters. There's minimization, making harmful behavior seem small or harmless. There's deflection, shifting the topic the moment accountability starts to creep in. And perhaps worst of all, there's betrayal dressed as kindness, saying all the right things while doing all the wrong ones when no one's watching. What makes these patterns even more disturbing is how accepted they've become. Our culture often rebrands deception as strategy. We call it protecting someone's feelings, avoiding unnecessary drama, managing expectations. But at the core, these are just softer names for manipulation. Over time, habitual, liars become skilled at convincing you it's you who's overreacting, that everyone lies, that you're too rigid, that if you really love them, you'd stop making everything a problem. But there's a hard truth here, and it can't be ignored. People who lie consistently are showing you that your peace is secondary to their comfort, that your trust is just another chip they're willing to bet with, that their ease is more important than your clarity. The Stoics didn't romanticize truth. They honored it. For them, honesty wasn't just a moral stance, it was a mental discipline. Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, they all believed that without truth, there could be no growth, no progress, no real connection. Seneca said, "Truth is the first lesson of friendship," and that still holds true today. Because when honesty disappears, so does real intimacy. What you're left with is just performance, a role someone plays, while you wonder if anything they say is actually real. So what can you do when dishonesty becomes the norm? First, stop listening to the apologies. Start watching the behavior. Do they change? Or do they repeat the same cycle? Guilt, apology, brief improvement, back to deception. When words and actions don't match, believe the actions. Next, stop trying to fix them. Their lies are not your homework, not your mission, not your fault. The moment you take on responsibility for their dishonesty, you become the one doing all the emotional labor for someone who will never return the investment. So start protecting your clarity, limit your exposure, set firm expectations, and if the lying continues, enforce real consequences, not threats, not warnings, actions. That might look like creating space. It might look like stepping away completely. It might even look like silence. But it must look like something. Because the only thing worse than being lied to is staying in a place where the truth never shows up. You deserve consistency, not perfection, but honesty. You deserve accountability, not performative apologies. And when that's not present, it's not your job to tolerate it. It's your job to leave. Because honesty isn't just about right or wrong, it's about mental health. And without it, you don't just lose faith in them, you lose fragments of yourself that may never fully come back. Don't let dishonesty rob you of one more piece of your peace. Not again. Not ever. And now we move into the fifth behavior, one that often hides behind a smile, sneaks into a joke, and then stings when you least expect it. Disrespect disguised as humor. Let's talk about what it really means when someone says "I was just kidding," and why you still feel hurt. Previously, we explored how dishonesty erodes the foundation of trust and how protecting your peace means holding people accountable for their actions, not just their words. Now, let's look at a behavior that often hides in plain sight: disrespect masked as humor. Maybe you've been there. Someone makes a joke at your expense, a little jab in public, a snide remark during dinner. You laugh along to keep things easy, to avoid the awkwardness. But inside, something tightens. You feel exposed, not seen, not understood, mocked. And when you finally find the courage to say, "That hurt," they laugh, roll their eyes, and toss out the classic line, "Relax. I was just joking." But was it really a joke? This is the fifth behavior no one should ever get away with. Disrespect disguised as humor, or brutal honesty. And it's one of the most socially accepted forms of emotional abuse, especially when it comes from people we love. I once worked with a woman named Carol, a retired librarian in her 70s, a quiet, thoughtful woman, raised in a time when you didn't talk back and definitely didn't make a fuss over words. She had always described her brother as the blunt one. He'd joke about her weight, her home, her divorce, always with a grin, always followed by, "I'm just being honest." Or worse, "If you can't take a joke, that's on you." For decades, Carol shrugged it off, until one Thanksgiving, he cracked a joke in front of the entire family. "Your ex-husband didn't leave. He escaped." That was the moment everything shifted. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just stopped talking to him. For 2 years, it wasn't the insult, she told me later. It was realizing I'd spent my entire life letting someone sharpen their tongue on my back and calling it love. That's how subtle this can be. These aren't just jokes. They are emotional knives, thin, sharp, and dressed in sarcasm. They target your body, your choices, your dreams, and then demand you laugh along to keep the peace. And when you don't, you're suddenly too sensitive, too emotional, can't take a joke. Let's get something clear. If the laughter only goes one way, it's not humor, it's humiliation. Then there's the weaponized version, brutal honesty. But make no mistake, it's not about truth. It's about dominance. "I'm just being real," they say, as they tear you down brick by brick. But true honesty, the kind rooted in care and character, is never brutal. It's clear, thoughtful, kind. What they're offering isn't truth. It's control, dressed up in the language of authenticity. From a Stoic perspective, this behavior is the opposite of virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote that our words should be used like medicine to heal, not to harm. The Stoics valued honesty, yes, but not at the cost of compassion or wisdom. Cruelty disguised as truth isn't courage. It's cowardice with clever vocabulary. So how do you respond? First, stop laughing at what hurts. Don't smile through discomfort. Don't excuse behavior that cuts you. The moment you minimize what hurts you, you teach others to do the same. Second, stop explaining away what was meant to sting. If someone repeatedly hides cruelty behind sarcasm, that's not your fault. That's not your failure to understand humor. It's their failure to show respect. You deserve relationships where your dignity isn't the punchline, where your boundaries aren't tested for sport, where honesty is offered with compassion, not as a weapon. And next, we'll look how to turn these realizations into action, how to build a life where you're no longer surviving emotional harm, but actively creating emotional safety. Let's move into what real emotional self-defense looks like. Previously, we unpacked the power of recognizing disrespect, especially when it hides behind sarcasm or brutal honesty. Now, let's explore what it actually looks like to respond not with rage or retreat, but with calm, clear strength. When someone wounds you and then tries to laugh it off, you name it. Not with emotion, not with explanation, just clarity. Say it plainly, that felt disrespectful. No yelling, no long debates. You don't owe them a breakdown to justify your boundary. Just let the discomfort stay right where it belongs with them. Because if someone repeatedly crosses the line and then hides behind, "I was just joking," or "you're too sensitive," that disrespect is still real, even if it's wrapped in a punchline. And if the behavior continues, don't escalate with volume, escalate with action. Step away, pull back emotionally, and if it continues, you have full permission to remove that person from your life entirely. Because your mental health matters more than someone else's comfort. Here's the thing, the people who truly deserve your time and energy are the ones who care how their words land, not just what they meant. And if that disrespect is coming from someone close, a sibling, a parent, a friend, a partner, remember this: proximity is not permission. Just because someone is close to you doesn't mean they get to degrade you. You don't owe access to anyone who uses your vulnerabilities for entertainment. Not ever. You are allowed to say, "That's not funny, that's not love," or even say nothing and walk away completely. Because dignity is not up for debate. Not anymore. Not in your presence. You've now seen 5 behaviors that no one, not even family, should ever get away with: constant criticism, boundary violations, gaslighting, and emotional manipulation. Kritik dishonesty, dressed up as a joke. Let's be clear, these are not personality quirks. These are warning signs. And now that you can recognize them, the real question becomes, what will you do next? Because tolerating toxic behavior doesn't make you strong. It makes you tired. Every time you let someone cross a boundary without consequence, you teach them and yourself that your peace is negotiable. But it's not. So pause. Ask yourself honestly, does this relationship energize me, or does it drain me? If it subtracts more than it adds, that's not love. That's damage disguised as loyalty. Start small. Say no without guilt. Set one clear boundary. Call out the joke, "That wasn't funny." Those are small acts, but they are powerful acts of self-respect. And they are how you begin to rebuild a life that is safe, solid, and truly yours. If this video spoke to you, take a moment, like, comment below, and subscribe. Your voice matters, and someone out there might need to hear you to find the courage to speak for themselves. The next video on your screen is your next step, your next breath of peace. Click it now. You've already proven you're brave enough to face the truth. Now let's keep going together.